Good afternoon, and to everyone that's online, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Vanessa Barnes, and I'm representing Restaurant and Catering Australia, and I'm pleased to be hosting today's webinar, Staffing Smarts, How Employer Sponsorship Can Support Your Food Business. Our guest today is R&CA from AustraliaMigrate. Ian works with hospitality operators every day to navigate sponsorship and visa pathways, so you'll get straight answers and practical steps from today's webinar. So the burning question is, why does this session matter? Staffing is the #1 pressure point for our restaurants. We all know that. Cafés and caterers, constant recruitment, turnover, and gaps on the roster comes at a real cost. Lost service, lost skills, and lost time. Employer sponsorship, it isn't a silver bullet, but it is a workable pathway to secure reliable people, plan your rosters with confidence, and protect service standards. Today is about clarity, what options exist, how they work, what they cost, and what's changed, and how to stay compliant. And with that, I'm going to welcome Ian to take over the webinar, and to thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for arranging this seminar today, and hopefully it'll shed some light for some people in various ways. There may be a certain amount of understanding of how the program works already, I'm not sure, but hopefully I can dot some I's and cross some T's with things that may not be known. So my company is called AustraliaMigrate. We've been operating as a migration agency since 2000, so that's 25 years. We do a lot of employer sponsorship visas, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. A lot in the hospitality industry, and not only in the city where I am, which is Sydney, but across Australia, meaning both metropolitan major cities as well as regional states and smaller towns around Australia. Hopefully by the end of the session, you'll get a clear understanding about what the major visa options are that are available to you, how they work, and what sort of things you need to look out for and be aware of. I think everyone knows that, and I was trying to look for some stats prior to the session, exactly what the staff shortages are in the hospitality industry. I couldn't come across a single number, but
Ian, you've put yourself on mute. Sorry, everybody, it won't be a minute.
Is that better?
That's better, yep.
Okay, just went on mute. So when did I go on mute? Yes, I'm not sure at what point.
Oh, only 2 seconds ago.
Okay, so thanks. If it happens again, just give me a shout out.
Yeah.
So needless to say, besides the hospitality industry, many other industries are also experiencing skill shortages. But it is a big issue in the hospitality industry. Now, what I've got prepared is some slides to give you an overview of what visa options are available in the hospitality industry. So Vanessa, if you can please click on to slide 1.
Yes, I'm just going to open that up.
Okay, so that's just about us, visa options in the hospitality industry. Thanks, if you can, yeah, that's good. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the visa options overview, and then give you a bit of a guideline on the process for each visa option and just things to be aware of when engaging in a potential sponsorship application. So one of the most important things is to always be very mindful of how to assess a potential applicant, because the last thing you want to do is go down the road of sponsoring the person, only to realize down the track that that person is not eligible and it's not something that can be easily fixed. So you need to be sure that the eligibility assessment is done properly at the get-go. So if you can go on to visa options overview, that is the first page. Now, principally, the main visa driver in the program is called a 482 visa. It falls under the heading of skills in demand visa. It's the go-to visa that we use in the restaurant, in any industry where we are doing an employer sponsorship. So the employer sponsorship is a very big part of the migration program in Australia. Other parts of it falls under the general skilled category. Other options in the skilled category are where applicants can apply independently, but that is a very unreliable way to get in. So the most reliable way, especially in the hospitality industry, is through employer sponsorship, and the most common visa is a 482 visa. Now, within a 482 visa, for a restaurant, cafe, or catering business, the only occupations that are possible to sponsor an applicant under are cooks and chefs. They used to have restaurant managers, but they were taken off the list last December. It is possible to do restaurant managers as well as trade waiters in certain types of categories, but they are more for regional or premium dining restaurants. So we can get onto that a bit later, but for the main, it is cooks and chefs. Now, what happens is that and this is information you may be very aware of, but it is important just to sort of like highlight it again. The main let's say, driving force in terms of who is going to be the eligible ones to apply for a 482 visa are generally people that are already in Australia on a student visa or a working holiday visa. So they are the ones that feed the 482 employer sponsorship category, particularly in the hospitality industry. Most of the visa applicants that we deal with are not initially sourced from overseas to come to Australia. They sort of sourced within the system. They're already in the system on usually a student visa and possibly a working holiday visa. Now, one of the requirements to be eligible for a visa applicant is from many countries is that if they have not done an Australian qualification in commercial cookery, such as a Certificate 3, Certificate 4, or a diploma in hospitality, they need to do a skill assessment. So if they have done a course in Australia and have done one of those qualifications, they do not need a skill assessment. And that makes a big difference in terms of being able to actively sponsor that person without waiting for them to do a skill assessment. So if, for example, let's say you had a good candidate from countries that do need skill assessments, which are typically countries like Thailand, Philippines, India, Nepal, which are typically the ones that feed into the migration program for cooks and chefs. If they have not done an Australian qualification, they've got to do a skill assessment, which could be a year-long process. So effectively, they're not really going to be any good to you in the immediacy because they need a skill assessment, which they may or may not get through. So that's why we always look at, when we look at a CV, has this person done an Australian qualification and to what level? And then we know that they kind of on the right eligibility track to be able to get that sponsorship. Now, most of the ones that come here as students and also working holiday visas, essentially they want to get a permanent visa. That's kind of their big aspiration. And, one can understand why. So, and they understand that in order to get there, they've got to go through certain steps. And that's why they look to get a 482 visa, because down the track, they can then apply for the permanent version of employer sponsorship, which is called a 186. So that's employer nominated sponsorship. So that is generally how it goes, 482 to 186 down the track. Now, in certain regional areas, there's also another visa, which is called a 494. It's a sort of a regional sponsored visa, which I don't want to spend time on in today's session because it's not an often done visa. It used to be more done, but in December last year, they leveled the playing field for all occupations in the migration program. So in other words, cooks and chefs both occupations can apply for permanent residence, where before they did not allow cooks to go on to permanent residence except in regional areas. Then there's also something which is called a labor agreement for premium dining restaurants. But that restaurant has to meet certain criteria to be recognized as a premium dining establishment. Needless to say, they're quite few and far between. And then there's also DARMA, which is a kind of a designated area migration. So that is for restaurants or cafes in regional locations where they can get permission, they can get certain concessions, such as a lower wage, English concession, age concession. So it's a whole process where they've got to get what's called a labor agreement. They first got to apply to the designated area representative, and then after that, they get a labor agreement. And that in the labor agreement, they can also include other occupations such as restaurant managers, cafe and restaurant managers. One visa that I'll just touch on is a training visa, which we do from time to time, and that is for somebody that has not yet got quite sufficient experience to be able to apply for a 482. So a training visa may be an option. All right, so if we can go on to the next slide, please, Vanessa. Thanks. If you can maybe slightly enlarge that if possible. I don't know if it's readable from where everyone is. So in the first dark blue column says skill in demand, and that is the program, the 482 program. That visa can be granted for up to 4 years. So that really, once a visa is granted, most of the time the restaurants won't select 4 years. They may select 2 years or 3 years, because after 2 years of that person working on that 482 visa, they then can apply for the 186, which is a permanent visa. So restaurants may say, business owners can say, look, I'm prepared to sponsor you, but you've got to work for us for, say, 2.5 years or 3 years before we'll do the 186. And most do say after 2 years we'll look at it, but you don't have to. It's up to you as the business owner, after how long you're prepared to help and support them with a 186, a permanent visa. So that visa, in a 482, there are 3 parts to it. There's the business that needs to be approved as a sponsor. It's called the standard business sponsorship. That is not really a hard application to get approved for. The business would just need to show their business registration, their organizational chart, and the financials of the business. So effectively, the Department of Home Affairs wants to see that the business is in fact operating, they are in business, and they have got reasonable financials. They don't have to be brilliant. They just have to look like, kind of like a proportionate to their overheads of staff and so on. The nomination is the second part. Now, the nomination is probably the trickiest part in the 3 parts of a 482 visa. The nomination is really about what the position is within the business. Now, that involves a few different elements that have to be lodged. The one is that if the person is not from an exempt country, labor market testing has to be done on 2 National Reach websites for at least 28 days. Now, if those 2 adverts, which are posted on job platforms like Seek, Indeed, CareerJet, Career One, they have to have certain compliance in terms of the wording. For example, the salary or the salary scale has to be provided. If no salary is provided and the salary is under 96,400, they'll refuse the nomination. So there are little important compliance requirements in the adverts. And time again, if we don't oversee as an agency the adverts being posted, often we post it for our clients. Even though we tell our clients this is the requirements, they'll still miss out something. and that can unhinge a whole application, or maybe delay us lodging it if we realize it too late in the piece. So labour market testing is a very important part of a nomination. So the nominations, as I said, really about the position. So there would be the labour market testing, the position description, employment contract, which can only be signed after the adverts have run for 28 days. If it's signed even one day before the adverts have run for 28 days, they're likely to refuse the application if they pick it up, because they'll say that you had a predetermined person in mind. You never made it available for Australians to apply for the position for the full length of time. And another important document that has to be provided is to explain why that is a genuine position, how the position fits into the scope of the business. Now, with restaurants, cafes and catering establishments, generally speaking, it's not a kind of a challenging argument to explain why that position, cook or chef, is a genuine position. But what the department have got their radar out for is if it's a fast food, sort of very low service type of establishment. So fast food, takeaway, franchises, unless it's, you know, quite a big group. But when I say quite a big, I'm not talking about McDonald's. It's like a proper restaurant. Is you cannot lodge, or you can lodge, but it'll be refused if it's deemed to be a nature of a fast food establishment, where there's not table service. There's you know, pick out the menu from the board in front, pay at the counter, not a tiered structure in the kitchen, maybe just one cook, pre-prepared meals. All of that points towards fast food, and you'd be in trouble to get that approved. So that's the kind of thing that they look out for. And then there's also the issue of salary. Now, salary is, needless to tell you, a big issue in this program. Now, the Department of Home Affairs set the salary level, which they call TISMIT, for all occupations in the program, whether it's hospitality, engineering, or IT, doesn't matter. The minimum salary level is $76,515 per annum. Now, you cannot pay even a cook or any occupation less than that if you want to get them sponsored. If you offer even $1 less than that, they'll refuse the application. So it gets a little bit tricky in terms of how to structure an employment contract, because you have to also refer to the restaurant award rates, the hospitality award rates, and most of the time the hourly rate is less than $76,515. So you have to guarantee that if the hourly rate, if the award is, if their level is at a certain level within the award rate, but that annualized salary is going to be less than $76,515, you'll have to say that you'll top up their salary to be at least the equivalent of $76,515 on a weekly basis, which is $1,471. Now, so with rates, when it's sort of like peak hours, I know that they do get higher, I don't know what you would call in the industry, but extra rates if it's peak hours and weekends and all of that. So if they're going to earn more income because they're working peak hours for that week, then you have to pay them an additional, you can't hold back and pay them only $1,471. But if it's less hours that make up to $1,471, you have to top up their salary to be at least $1,471. Now, there's something in the industry, not in the industry, within the world of immigration, there's kind of like a police force that watch over this migration program, which is called Border Force. Now, Border Force are, it's kind of when you arrive at the airport, that's who you meet as Border Force staff to let you into Australia. Now, Border Force also have a division that look after the compliance of the program. So they can pick on any establishment, whether it be a restaurant, engineering, or whatever, and asked to see the records of payment of the staff. So they want to see that the business has been compliant with paying their staff members according to the employment contract. So randomly, they can pick on any business in the program. And it's very unfortunate if they pick on a business, because it's a lot of work to get it together and can cause a lot of trouble if you have not been compliant. Sometimes establishments may not knowing, they may do it naively, but of course there are delinquents that do take advantage of their staff, and those are the ones that should really not be part of the program. So it is very important, in other words, to be compliant, because it is possible to be monitored at any random point in time. And if they do choose your particular business to be monitored, they make you go through a lot of hoops and information until they come back with a satisfactory report. If they are not satisfied that you have been compliant, they can take further actions, such as they can fine the business, they put the business on a sort of a non-compliant register, they may suspend the ability to sponsor. So there's all these sort of consequences that can happen if you're not compliant. But most of the time, maybe 1% of businesses get monitored, but you always have to be aware that, you know, it could be your unlucky day, and you always need to be compliant. In other words, pay the staff according to what was in the employment contract. Now, when it comes to the visa applicant, so that's the nomination. With regard to the visa applicant, as I started off by saying, the main feeders into the program are usually, from our experience, those ones that have come through on student visas that come from typically India, Nepal, Indonesia, Korea. Those are usually the ones that the most common sort of nationalities. Of course, there could be other ones as well, but once we see that they have done a course in Australia and have studied up to Certificate 4 usually and diploma, then we know that they're going to be fine for their eligibility as far as their studies are concerned. And then over and above that, they would need to show that they've had at least 1 year of work experience or equivalent of 1 year if they've been working part-time, which they are required to do on a student visa, and they can only work 24 hours. So long as the combination of all their work experience comes to at least 1 year, which could be while they were studying, then they would be eligible from a work point of view. Then they would just, over and above that, they'd need to meet the English requirement, character checks, which is police clearance. So how do they do that? They have to present their CV, employment references, evidence of pay slips, qualification documents. Now, most of the time, those students or working holiday visas are already known to those particular restaurants that are, or catering businesses, cafes that are interested in sponsoring them, and that they are working there, you know, on their student visas or working holiday visas. So they get known to those establishments, and then those establishments realize this would be a good person to keep in the business. And, you know, how do we do that? So the way that they would do that is through a 482 visa. Now, as I said, leading on from a 482 is the 186. When an applicant has been employed for at least 2 years on a 482, they can then apply for the 186, temporary residence transition. That's one pathway. There's another pathway, which is called direct entry, where they have to have a skill assessment and show that they've worked for at least 3 years post-qualification. So the temporary residence transition pathway is easier because they just have to show that they've spent 2 years on a 482 visa in Australia, which can be between more than one employer. So if they work for one employer and that doesn't work out and they go to employer number 2, they can use the time that they spent with the first employer and the second employer towards the 2-year requirement. And then in that application for a 186, there's a nomination and a visa application. It's a little bit like a 482. It's kind of, but there's not 3 parts, there's only 2 parts, and there are some variations, not major. There's no labor market testing required for a 186 application. The 494 is, again, it used to be a bit more, the 494 visa used to be more done before they allowed cooks to be able to apply for a 186, but now it's not really a visa that we go to in most of the time. We kind of hover mainly around the 482 and the 186. Are there any questions at this point? Maybe. Okay, let's carry on to the next slide then, Vanessa. Yeah, 482 or 49. Okay. All right, so yeah, that one's fine. So okay, so for labor agreement for premium dining restaurants. So firstly, those restaurants have to have a sort of sommelier. They have to have a turnover of at least 2 million. They have to have sort of silver service, sort of like cutlery and crockery. They have to have a complicated menu and so on. So they can apply for what's called a premium dining labor agreement. And in that labor agreement, they can elect that trade waiters, restaurant managers, cooks and chefs could be sponsored. So we do that for two particular restaurants where they have particularly wanted to sponsor trade waiters, because for cooks and chefs, they can do it through their normal 482 sponsorship, through their standard business sponsorship through a 482. They don't have to use a premium dining pathway to do that. So it's very useful for those other occupations where they cannot do it through the normal 482 occupation list. For the DARMA, that is again for regional areas only, and again you can have those other occupations, chefs, cooks, restaurant managers, and just to repeat, you can get concessions for salary, for English. So we've got one, for example, where the applicant's English is below what is required. The restaurant do want to pay that person less than what the normal TISMET level is. So there's a few advantages that they can use in that program. Also, if the person, in this case not, but if the person is over 45, they can also use DARMA to get that person a visa and later on to go into a 186 visa, which is a permanent visa, so long as they've spent at least 2 years on the DARMA program, and 3 years if they are restaurant manager or trade waiter, then they can go into a 186. And that application has to be lodged before they turn 55. So there's a bit of scope in terms of age that can be used DARMA. Now, for DARMA, now within Australia, certain states are DARMA, like for example, South Australia, Northern Territory, Tasmania, Western Australia. And within other states like Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, only certain, smaller towns would be possibly under a DARMA. Maybe just go on to the next slide. These are the costs for sponsoring an overseas person. Now, I'm just going to stay with the 482 program. Now, on a 482, in order to apply to become a business sponsor, the cost to the Australian government is $420. That will then allow that sponsorship approval is valid for a 5-year period. A business can use it as many times as they want within that 5-year period for multiple applications. They don't have to redo it. Under the nomination, that is done on a person-by-person basis, case by case. For every application, they have to pay a base fee and then $1,200, which is called Skilling Australia Fund per year, that they want to sponsor that person for. So if they choose, let's say 3 years, that's going to be 1,200 times 3 plus 330. And then when the visa gets granted, it'll be granted for a 3-year period. If the business turnover is over 10 million, it costs 1,800. And then with the visa application, the visa fee now for all applicants, regardless of occupation, is $3,210 per person. The same for the applicant's wife or spouse. partner, and $805 per child. Now, we always have this question about who can pay for what in this application. Now, it is required that the business pays for the sponsorship and the nomination part. They cannot pass that on to the visa applicant. And for the visa application part, the 482, the actual application, it can be paid either by the business or by the visa applicant. Now, sometimes what happens is that employers say, look, we're doing you a kind of a favor by sponsoring you, but we expect you to pay the nomination fee. And often the visa applicant is only too happy to do that, because then they get into the migration system because they get a 482 visa. But just remember what I said, that if Border Force monitor it and pick up that the visa applicant has paid the nomination fee, it's going to cause a whole lot of problems, and which you don't want to know about. So it's better not to even think about passing that cost on. It's illegal to do that. So it is a cost for the business, but then you have to recognize that you are getting a stable employee that will be with you for the time it takes for the visa to be granted, which nowadays they are looking at maybe 4 to 6 months. It is gone slower. They do go through stages. At the moment, they're in their slow stage. And then 2 years on a 482 at least. And then if they apply for a 186, it's another at least a year or so waiting for the 186 to be approved. Once they get the 186 visa, they then can leave that company if they want to, and there's nothing that an employer can do about it. The intention is that they should work for that employer for 2 years, but there's nothing in law that holds them down to work for that employer after the 186 is granted. Similarly, if you've got a 482 visa applicant and that person is not working out, you can terminate their employment like you would with any Australian. And they will then get 180 days to basically try and find another employer to take over their visa and lodge a nomination for them. If you find a person that's already got a visa and they've already got time on their 482 visa, all you would need to do is lodge a nomination to connect that person's visa with your business. You don't have to necessarily apply for a new visa for that person. I think we sort of get into the time, or how much time have we got left, Vanessa?
That was very informative. Thank you so much, Ian. So we've got about 5 minutes thereabouts left. And I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Ian. I think it's really important to understand that AustraliaMigrate are specialists in this field. And if you are after any information, you absolutely can reach out to Ian and his team. The information is in the R&CA Director Partners part of the website, or else we will also share it as part of the post comms that we send out after the webinar. Also, too, I think it's really important to note that this is, for some people, a very confusing it's something that not a lot of us probably know enough about. And Ian, I'm sure that's an area that you'd be more than willing to connect with the guests from today and even further from today, and take them through the process and guide them and support them.
Yeah, absolutely, Vanessa. So, I'd like to share my office numbers if I can.
Of course.
Should I type it in here, or
you read it out and I'll type it in here?
Okay, 0416 276677. And our mobile, the office number is 02 Sydney 9411 6000.
Okay.
All right.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's right, isn't it?
Yes, that is right. If I can just say what I was saying a bit earlier on, if any of you have any questions that you're not sure of, or even if you're doing the visa your own, or you've engaged with another provider, but you just want to have a second opinion maybe, please get in touch with me, and I'm happy to help out and give you information on the phone that will help clarify any particular issues you may have. What is very important, as I said in the beginning, is to do the assessment of the visa applicant's eligibility very carefully at the get-go, so you don't go down the track and find out later that that person's not going to be eligible.
I think
so we can help you do that assessment, and we don't charge for that. Sorry, Vanessa, you go.
No, you're fine. I thought that you'd finished. I apologize.
No, not
the other information that I did want to mention as we do wrap up today is that Ian and Elaine have put together a really great guide. It's the migration guide, and that is available for R&CA members through the member portal. And there's quite a bit of information there that AustraliaMigrate have shared with us that we have made available to our members as well. So if you are a member and you forget your login, just send an email to marketing@rca.asn.au, and I can get you into that portal to be able to access those assets as well.
Right.
So nobody has any questions? I don't know whether I need to be worried about that or whether I need to be relieved. I think maybe a little bit of both.
Look, often we find that, when we give these sort of talks or even phone discussions, business owners will come back to us in a few days and say, look, I've thought about that. I've got this particular situation. What do you think about it? Where should we go with it? So it is a bit of a process to take it all in and then see how it can apply in your particular business.
Well, I've found that really informative, and I'm really grateful that you've taken the time to break down the information for us today. It's been really insightful, and I hope that everybody that's on the call has been able to find some clarity around the process and the pathways, etc. But as Ian said, he's always available. You've got his number there, and he's very accommodating to be able to help you and support you through the process. But I'm really grateful. Thank you so much, Ian, and to your team as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Vanessa, for arranging it. As a partner to Restaurant and Catering, which you've been for a number of years, what has been very supportive of us, and we really appreciate that and hope to continue into the future with it.
Absolutely. I think Greg's just typing something, so I might just wait a second in case he has a question. Oh no, thank you for. Anyway, I'm really grateful to see everybody online. Thank you so much, and we will share the slides. We will share the information. It will be post the email that you do get after this webinar, though. So I'll send one out specifically for the attendees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.